everyone. Today's episode is with Adrian Gordon, who is an internationally performed composer and seasoned music editor. As a composer with Alfred Music and founder of Leap Year Music Publishing, he specializes in publishing string music for diverse school ensembles. His compositions appear on Orchestra Association music performance reading lists across multiple states, including California, Florida, Georgia, Maryland, North Carolina, and Texas. Adrian is a sought-after clinician and conductor, sharing his expertise with diverse audiences. He also authored the insightful book Note to Self, a music director's guide for transitioning to a new school and building a thriving music program. Born and raised in Miami, Florida, he currently resides in Charlotte, North Carolina with his wife and two sons, serving as the director of orchestras at Providence Day School.
I'm educational justice coach Lindsay Lyons, and here on the Time for Teachership podcast, we learn how to inspire educational innovation for racial and gender justice, design curricula grounded in student voice, and build capacity for shared leadership. I'm a former teacher leader turned instructional coach. I'm striving to live a life full of learning, running, baking, traveling, and parenting because we can be rockstar educators and be full human beings. If you're a principal, assistant superintendent, curriculum director, instructional coach, or teacher who enjoys nerding out about co-creating curriculum with students, I made this show for you. Here we go. Adrian Gordon, welcome to the Time for Teachership podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, I appreciate your time. And I'm excited today to talk about all things that you do, which is a lot, and your new book, which is super exciting. Is there anything you want listeners to either know about, you think about, just to kind of situate the conversation before we dive in?
Well, I guess I have my tentacles in just about everything: education, publishing, composing, conducting, performing. I do quite a bit because I love it. And yeah, that's basically, I have a portfolio career is what I like to say. So I do quite a bit, and I really am passionate about music and music education. And yeah, I'm just happy to share that with you guys today.
Excellent. I'm so excited. Okay, so I like to ground the episodes in kind of a freedom dream. So Dr. Bettina Love talks about the concept of freedom dreaming as dreams grounded in the critique of injustice, which I just love. And so what is that big dream that you hold as you think about music education, as you think about the spaces that you're in? What is that dream for you?
It comes across as kind of goofy, but there's this comedy skit on I think it's Key and Peele, and they have this teacher draft. And the way they do it, it's very similar to like a sports trading, players. But you think about it, you're like, man, these are teachers who are shaping the future, shaping our children. Why don't they get that kind of respect and gratitude? So I guess my big wish would to have that kind of seriousness in relationship to the way we treat our educators, the way we treat our teachers, and also the way music education is treated up against the backdrop of sports and athletics. There's a ton of money. I know there's not money that goes into the arts, but it's nowhere near what you see in sports and on all athletics. So, and I think with athletics, you can do that, and it's a great discipline for several years. But once your body hits a certain, stopping point, it's like you can't continue to do those kinds of things. But you can always play, you can always make music, and you can always be in community with others and contribute beautiful sounds to the people around you. So I think it's so important, and I just wish sometimes that it had that same gravitas that you see athletic programs having.
Wow. Love the Key and Peele reference. Also love situating music against sports to think about that, like difference in funding, in hype, and just like our general culture and society.
Right.
And I love that you just named like music you can literally do forever. I'm thinking about my grandma who had dementia, and music was the thing that like grounded her and the thing that brought her back. Mm-hmm. Right. And like that music therapy is so popular with the elderly. And I just think about all of the uses and also with my toddler, right? Like music is just this joyous space, like birth to death. Like this is it, right? This is beautiful and an opportunity to engage in whatever way you can. Like, oh, so cool. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
I know that
thank
you've done
you.
so much, and I know that you also talk about like the role of community in music, which I just find a fascinating concept and
Hmm.
idea. And so I'm curious to know about what you have done in the context or category of like community and music that you want to share with us, like a kind of a success share, if you will.
Well, I think first for me, it kind of started with a mindset shift. I had to, in my book, Note to Self, I talk about how you kind of have to remember your why versus your what. So, what are we doing? Yeah, we are teaching, we are educating, but why are we doing it? We do this, develop those relationships with these kids and influence them in a positive way, help them, guide them. And then we understand that music happens to be the vehicle in order to do that. So I had to kind of wrap my head around that and think to myself that, yes, I am teaching, but I do first and foremost need to develop those relationships with the kids. And the byproduct of that is a really cohesive program, a really strong program that there's more investment for the kids. They feel accountable to each other, they feel connected to each other. Um, so for me, what did that look like? For me, it looked like sharing the appropriate parts of my life with them. So, for example, I'm very big into composing. So I talk a lot about composing with my students and trying to include them. And it's kind of related to what we do in the field of music. I'll bring pieces in that they can play and see, like the sketches, and actually play through them. I've been able to help students with compositions of their own, which is really special to me. We do, and then other things where we can really get everybody together. So I'll do like pizza nights with my students where we're not focused on anything pedagogical. It's just, hey, let's come in, let's have some pizzas and watch a movie together. And we do it after school. So we're not, interrupting any instruction time. And what we'll do, like some of the fun things that it's been really successful is we will do pizzas from all over the place. And the kids love this. And it doesn't cost a ton, especially if you have one person bringing one, another person bringing another. So you just get all these pizzas in the room and we do these taste tests and the kids feel so invested in it. It's just a cool thing to watch. And, it's just part of that community building. And that's what I think every program needs to have if you really want to make some great music together. Because it's hard for them to play well together as an ensemble if they don't really get along. So first and foremost, like I said, I had to have that mindset shift and then think about ways I could do that. And that's one of the big successes I've had, scheduling these really um, regular community events throughout the school year.
I love the grounding in the sense of belonging and community and just like not even necessarily music, but I also love the pieces that you're bringing in. Like, I'm just thinking like curricularly that are musicy, like, so you're sharing your parts of your life that connects
Mm-hmm.
deeply with me. When I was teaching in my second year, I participated in like a slam poetry competition. And so I would like
Mm-hmm.
preview my pieces, like test them out with the students who just were
Yeah,
like, yeah, but then it's like, but now there's space for you. Like it's a nice vulnerable piece as the educator when you can say, hey, I'm doing this thing, but that vulnerability really is in service of like the connection and to open you up
right.
to do the original composition yourself, which is so cool that you have them do that. Like that is awesome. I'm
Yeah.
curious to know actually like how is there a particular way you sequence those? I'm thinking about a person who's listening to this like, oh, that actually sounds really cool and I kind of want to do that, but I just don't even know where to start. Like how do you bring that in? Like what does that look like in your class?
With helping students compose, you're talking about?
Yeah, like any of the sequence of things. Like do you spend a certain time with like community building first and then you share and then you help them in a particular way share theirs, or what's the process? Yeah.
Yeah, so when I do stuff like that, the one that I just finished, which I'm really proud of, the student, he approached me probably early along in the school year, and he said, "I have been working on this piece. I'd love to show it to you." And I didn't think he thought anything of it. He showed it to me, and I was like, "Hey, this is really good. Why don't you continue to work on it? I'll kind of coach you through it, some of the aspects of composing." At the end of the semester, at our winter concert, why don't you perform, why don't we perform this? The entire orchestra, the high school orchestra will perform this. And then on top of that, I think you should conduct it and I should play your instrument. So I'll be in the ensemble and you're conducting, and I'm passing the baton. So I thought that was really cool. So it was a really cool educational moment where I got to coach him through the composition process, coach him through the conducting process, and have the students watch who are observing that, learning what goes into conducting. It was just like a multifaceted lesson for everybody, and for me too, how to kind of communicate those ideas about composition, and then why I'm doing the things up on the podium that I'm doing. Because I do them, but I don't necessarily think about them because it's just so ingrained in me. And to be able to communicate that and pass that along, and watch a student develop, compositionally and conducting, it's fascinating. So there's that element, and then I get to bring in my own pieces and really show them, hey, I work through things. The things that I'm doing are perfect at first, but these are my sketches. I do revisions and edits, and then I get to bring in the final product. So for example, last year I showed my students a project that I worked on. It was a composition project for this youth orchestra out in New York. And the theme had been Stop Violence, Show Kindness. And I had brought the sketches in and I showed my students. And we finally performed it out in New York. But this year I wanted to bring it in and have my current students play it. And the cool thing about that is I'm able to talk about some of the music theory elements. Like, some points I'll just say, hey, all my music theory kids, what do you see here between, the violin line and the cello line? And they'll say, oh, for music theory, I see contrary motion, and those are really cool connections that they're making. So, any way I can connect the dots for them, I try and do it.
I love that grounding in like the personal, like this was yours. And I also love like the student leadership element that you're building a lot. Like there's so many different, like just very personal things in
Mm-hmm.
this, but also just that I think sometimes in any course, in any educational space, sometimes we're too divorced, like the skills are too divorced from the thing we're trying to do and like the
Right,
final product. And to be able to say, hey, I wrote this thing, we composed this thing, or we played this thing, like let's use this for music theory. Like let's use this thing that's super cool and we're
right,
already invested in to dive deeper and explore, as opposed to, we have to use this thing that's typically used or is this traditional thing or, whatever. It's like,
yeah.
no, this is the thing we care about. Let's just use this.
Yeah, it's a really cool feeling. And then I've done other things like just talk about um, personal life. Like I had this one student in my last school, and he was a very tough kid, great kid, but he had, school wasn't his forte. But he was in the orchestra. He stuck with it. And I thought he'd quit. I thought he'd give up on orchestra. But I think one of the things that got him hooked was I just would ask him about fishing because he would wear fishing shirts, and I love fishing too. So I would talk to him about fishing, and he would bring me pictures of his weekend fishing, and I'm like, oh yeah, I caught the same kind of fish. I lived in Florida. That's a peacock bass, or that's a cichlid. And he's like, you know about fishing? I'm like, yeah, I fish all the time. So we would trade our fishing pictures, and talk about great spots where we go fishing. And I think that really it kind of humanized me and made him see me as, hey, this is an ally. This is somebody who's here to care about me and not just be this figurehead, this teacher who's wagging the finger in your face. And this kid, he stuck with it, which I was very surprised. It happened to be, I think, one of his favorite classes. And I don't think it had anything to do with the music. I just think it had to do with the connection that he made. So that human element, I think, goes a long way, and we don't even realize how much those small details can touch a student and really change and alter their path. Like I said, I thought this kid would definitely be long done with music, but I think that little connection hooked him.
Oh, I love that story. And it makes me think too about, just like new teacher overwhelm, for example. So a new teacher is in the same role that you were in, and it's just like, how do I even possibly make connections? I have, so many students or so little time, all the things that often are barriers to doing exactly what you did. Is there some either structure or approach or mindset that you use and have valued in being able to do that kind of stuff? Because I think some people see it as like an ideal, but not like something they can put into practice.
No, it's practical. And I think the first part is vulnerability. Vulnerability. I think you have to have that mindset. So one of the things that I do that's free, it's absolutely free. Every class, I walk into the class and I say, okay, guys, it's joke of the day. And I give them the worst dad joke I can think of or that I can find. And the kids, I mean, they roll their eyes. They're like, oh my gosh, you just pierced my heart with how bad that was. But you know what? It's a way to break the ice. It's a way to let them know, hey, we're here to have fun. And there's time and place we can have fun, but we can also do the learning part too. And I'm here to talk to you like a human being, not just your teacher, again, wagging that finger at you. So that's a real practical thing that I do every single day. Joke of the day. And it works. And the kids, at first they're like, no, no joke of the day. But as we progress throughout the school year, they're like, where's the joke of the day? You forgot.
I love it. Oh, that's so good. So as I'm thinking about like, being a member of the orchestra, for example, or just like a person in your class, I'm thinking about, okay, so we have like this belonging that is built and it seems like it's ongoing, right? It's the same joke of the day is every day.
Yes.
And this pizza party like happens often, right? And so we have this kind of belonging. I hear your musical compositions, right? I have the space to make my own musical compositions, participate in playing with the team that I belong to. I'm wondering also from your own, I don't know if it's like how much of your own or I don't know exactly how to phrase my question. I imagine in as a musical composer yourself, composing something has a process to it, right? So there's like, I imagine
Mm-hmm.
like a spark, and then there's like the literal steps that you go through to compose the music before it is final. And I'm wondering, does that inform how you coach others to like students to compose theirs, or does that process that you have used personally kind of translate to how you coach students to even play the composition? I'm wondering just from a curricular lens, how that personal connection that you have with the content that you're teaching connects to your instructional decisions. Does that question make sense?
Yeah, well, I think they all inform one another. And I've talked about this before where I think I'm a better conductor because I compose, and I'm a better composer because I teach. I'm a better teacher because I conduct. And it's just kind of circular, and each one informs the other. So, for example, if I'm writing something, and this can be very hard for someone who's not in the classroom, and I think that's what kind of gives me an advantage. I understand the exact developmental pedagogy for each ensemble at each stage. And I know, for example, hey, if I'm writing a grade one piece, I can't throw, for example, like for the violins, I can't throw a C sharp in there, a high three on their G string. That's not going to work. They're not there yet. I got to give it another year or so. And I understand that because I'm in the classroom, and I'm intimately aware of what they're capable of doing at each developmental stage. So they all kind of inform one another and make me a better musician, make me a better composer, make me a better conductor. I'm more sensitive to those things. If I see something like that, let's say it's for the next level up, I understand that, okay, this is something that's new to them. It's not something that they've been doing yet. So as a conductor, now I need to slow down and figure out ways that we can reinforce this, and make sure that they're grasping this concept because they haven't had this for that long. So, it's all connected to me.
Wow, I just love that so much. Even as like the musical metaphor for any content area that you're teaching, right? It's like the idea of there is this developmental progression. I need to know that. I need to know where my students are in the developmental progression. And I need to make sure that as I kind of create my original compositions, whether that's musical compositions or like I'm even thinking of the metaphor of musical compositions for like unit development, right? Or something like I am scaffolding it in that way that students are able to move forward. And if they're not at the level that they need to be at, like they're not ready for that next step. I need to slow it down so that they are
Correct.
able to get it. Like, wow, what a cool metaphor for even like non-musical educators. Super
Yeah,
awesome. Thank you.
yeah.
I imagine that you have faced many a challenge in the classroom space or even in the compositional space. I'm curious to know, like, what is one of those challenges that you faced and how did you deal with it? How did you overcome it? I'm thinking of particularly the listeners who are maybe in a similar position and trying to do big things like you are, and just wondering what you could teach them and kind of inspire them with as like challenge, but also here's how I worked through it.
Hi, this is Leah from the podcast team. In this episode, Adrian Gordon is sharing their free resource, a composition mind map to help you develop your own music ideas. You can get it at lindsaybethlyons.com/blog/168. Now back to the episode.
Wow, that's a deep question.
Sorry.
Well, no, it's okay. I mean, for someone like me, I'm a black man, so it's been hard. I think, particularly in the instrumental world, and it's mainly classical music, to find my footing. I remember when I first started teaching. I never forget. I started teaching, and it was just general music. And I remember I had a parent who came up to me and I was like, who's your favorite composer? And it wasn't in a way of interest in getting to know me. It was almost like a litmus test, like, you know, who are you bringing into the classroom to teach to my kid? And I just, from that point, I've always felt like there's always going to be that little bit of a barrier. So I have never felt fully accepted in this realm. And, just being instrumental music, classical music, string music, there's not that many um, black players, black composers. Right now, I'm about to present a session on diversity in the orchestra and underrepresented composers. And one of the things that I'm learning right now is how few um, composers of color there are, particularly at the beginning stages. So you think about, for example, football. You have students who are so engrossed in football because they can see their reflection in those players. It's something that they can connect with. You don't really have that particularly in my discipline with strings. Beginners really can't see themselves. Young black students, young Latino students, they can't really see themselves in the composers that they're playing and make that similar connection. And sorry to bring it back to athletics again, but they can't see their reflection there and latch on the same way you would envision a kid latching on in football or basketball or whatever. So I'm learning right now that there's just a real big need to have more underrepresented composers, particularly at the beginning stages, so these kids can really latch on and you can really have a complete kind of tapestry of what the country looks like. So that's been really difficult. And, off of just a unofficial count that I'm doing right now, I've found about, when you think about graded music, so the way we play music and the way you see it in curriculum is at a beginner stage, you'll see it at a grade 0, which is something straight out of their method book. And then they kind of move up to a grade half, then a grade 1, maybe a grade 1.5, grade 2, grade 3, grade 4. By the time they get to high school, they're hitting about a grade 4, grade 5, for the most part, not everybody, but that's what progressively happens. So at the grade 0, grade half, and grade 1, and grade 1.5, from the little bit of research I've done, I found about maybe 5 composers in the country that are doing what I'm doing and creating content, creating music for these beginning stages. So that's been a really hard pill to swallow. And seeing like there's a big need for more music from underrepresented composers out there. So that's something that I'm hoping to see change and something that I'm passionate about. I'm happy to be working with the New Canon Project, where they are actually putting their money where their mouth is, and having people like me, other composers who are out there, mentor younger composers of color and get those pieces in the hands of students. And I'm walking through the process with my my mentee, I guess, and helping her understand what's appropriate at this level, how to phrase things in a cello section or in a bass section, why we can't do this, why we can't do that. So I'm happy to see those things happening, and I'm just hoping to see more of that in the next couple of years, I would say.
Incredible. Thank you for sharing that. And I think there's so many pieces in there that we could have like four separate podcasts on it.
Yes.
And I think one of the things that I'm hearing is like the structural change needs to happen, right? The systems of how we get folks in positions of like being composers and being I don't know all the musical terms, but in positions where that work is used and valued. And then also being able to say as the educator, I can be individually like a composer that my students can look at and see a mirror for. And I can, in the classroom, as you've said before, like really support, and whether it's a formal mentorship role or it's like a kind of informal, this student just created their original composition that we now happen to be doing and performing, right? For everyone,
Right.
there's like these multiple levels all the way from like classroom instructional practice to structural inequities that need to be righted, right? That there are so many opportunities for change and calls for change. And even if you're listening and you're a person who's like, well, the structure needs to change, like, but there are still things that you can do in the classroom level to make that a priority. And like you're saying, you've done all of the research to figure out like how many folks are in those spaces that are doing the grade. I think I wrote this down right. 0.51, 1.5. Right.
About that. Yeah. It's not that many.
So to be able to say like, well, then that's who I'm using, right? Like that's like, I'm centering that and decentering the stuff that parent or whoever was asking about, right? Like, no, like we get enough of that. Like, no. Like this is what is becoming central.
And not that we don't perform music, some of the masterworks, and teach about those things, because I do owe a lot of my own training to those. But I think there's room for everything. There's room on the table for everything, and I would hope to see more diversity in there. And again, I don't think that means that you completely throw out the baby with the bathwater. It's just including everything to make a complete tapestry. That makes sense.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for clarifying that and for sharing all of the stuff today. I think one of the things that I think is so interesting about podcast episodes in general and like our conversation today is there's so much in the conversation and there's so many directions to take a nugget of something that you shared and the listeners like, I'm going to go in this direction or this direction. I'm wondering if you had some advice to give to a listener right now as they stop the episode and they go try to like implement something or take action on something that you shared. What would you say is the place to start? Like, what's the one thing that they could do next and see a big return on?
I would say, invest in yourself, and you can do that not easily, but there's resources out there. I'd say professional development is a good place to start. I'm a big proponent of heading to conferences if you can, state conferences. Sometimes they have district or regional conferences where you can get a lot of professional development. And also when you're there, you tend to network with people and just pick up things that other people are doing, learning about their practices in the classroom. Just the conversations that happen at random. They're so valuable, and they are great tools to bring back to your own teaching. So I think if you're really serious about improving yourself, see if you can go out and be a part of a professional development, and just start networking with people, talking with more experienced educators, and see if you can find a mentor. That was a big blessing for me when I first started. I would say the biggest influences that I had were not necessarily music teachers. They were classroom teachers. I was with a group of kindergarten teachers who, I tell you, they were so spot on. Like, I learned so much from these ladies, four of them, and they were so good. And I just remember every week I would soak in something new about classroom management, the way to interact with kids, the standard that we hold them to, the professionalism. So look around, do observations in your own school. If you know there's master teachers or in your county, reach out to them. So yeah, those are some of the things I would say to someone who's starting out. Just really invest that time into yourself so that you can bring that back to your students.
I love that. And so one of the next questions that I usually ask is fun, can relate to all the things we've been talking about, can be something totally different. Like fishing is an example of someone said once. And so I think about as educators and people in education, we're always like passionate about learning and we're always learning stuff. So my question typically is like, what have you been learning about lately? Feel free to answer that. But I also know you've been working on a lot of stuff. So you have your
Mm-hmm.
publishing company, you have your compositions, you have all sorts of your book. Like, if there is something that you want to share that folks can learn from, that's another way to answer this question if you'd like.
Oh wow. So yeah, like I said, I've been learning a lot about I guess the stats for composers, underrepresented composers, which is just kind of, I knew it was kind of bleak, and I knew, but just to see the number, put a number value to it, you're like, oh man. So there's just a lot of work to be done in that regard. So that's one of the things that I'm learning about right now. I guess I'm stretching myself with composition. I'm doing this really cool project for a school out in Seattle, and I'm doing something kind of different than I'm used to. I'm composing something for strings, but it's strings and drum set. So it's not a typical combination that you would see a string orchestra and a drum set, but the sound works, and I think the kids that I'm writing this for are really, really going to enjoy it. So I'm looking forward to putting it in front of them and seeing their faces hopefully light up when they get to play it, hear it all come together. And then
Wow.
on the other side, like what am I doing maybe outside of music? Um, I'm a big nerd. Like I love cooking shows, so I'm learning a lot about cooking. I could watch like Gordon Ramsay. I could watch like Top Chef, like all those shows. I could watch all that stuff, and just soak it all in. I'm a big foodie, so I love good food, and I love trying to cook when I have time. So I'm learning a lot about that. Like the other day, I just experimented with how to cook like a really nice piece of salmon. How you go about doing that? And I was watching, go and you know, that's just something kind of nerdy about me that I love to do, and it's outside of music. So
I love it. Oh my gosh. I love the things that are both related to the topic and then also not. So good. I think it paints all of us as like whole human beings, right? Like
oh
we're
yeah,
multifaceted.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
That's so good. Also, if you have like a audio recording at some point, once those students play that composition you're working on with the strings and the drums, we can link it to the blog post for this episode because I would love to hear
Sure.
that. Super cool.
Yeah, well, I'm supposed to hand it to them, put it in their hands on probably like April 1st or so, April 2nd, somewhere around there. And they need to work, they need time to work on it. And then we're going to do the premiere. I'm flying out there to be with them for a couple days in June for the premiere. So once I get that, I can shoot it your way. Absolutely.
Amazing. This episode's probably going to air in June, so that'll be perfect.
Yeah, awesome.
So good. All right. So finally, where are people going to find stuff like this, connect with you, learn from you, continue to like, get all the stuff, read your book? Where online
Yeah.
are you and how do people get in touch?
Well, you can find me online on my website, which is adriangordonmusic.com. So all my stuff there, my schedule, my calendar, which is crazy right now. I'm kind of traveling all over the place, and my book, which is also up there, and it's also available on Amazon. It's called Note to Self: a Music Director's Guide for Transitioning to a New School and Building a Thriving Music Program. So that's it.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Do you want to give us like a preview of like what is the most exciting part of your book so that people can just get like a tiny taste of what's in there?
Yes, I will. Yeah,
That's
give
a
me one
big
second.
question too. So feel free to be like, no, Lindsay, I will not.
So in the book, I talk about kind of building those boundaries and what you should prioritize. And part of that is your personal health, your mental health, your emotional health, but your family time is a part of that too. So, I'm about to present and I'm going to be reading this little excerpt from my book, and it goes like this. It says, you have a unique role in your family that can only be filled by you. Whether it's your smile, your jokes, your stories, your affection, your singing, your dancing, your laughing, your playing, your attention, your hugs, your encouragement, or whatever it is that makes you special to your family. Let your family members get the best parts of you. No matter what your family looks like, remember that you need your family and your family needs you.
That's so good. Thank you for sharing that. What an important reminder.
Yeah, it's really important, especially as new teachers and transitioning teachers. We got to remember our family comes first.
And busy teachers like yourself.
Yeah, busy teachers too. Yeah, family comes first. Absolutely.
Amazing. What a wonderful way to end. Adrian, thank you so, so much for your time today. This has been a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. It's been a real pleasure to be with you and chat about all things music related.
If you like this episode, I bet you'll be just as jazzed as I am about my coaching program for increasing student-led discussions in your school. Shane Safir and Jamila Dugan talk about a pedagogy of student voice in their book, Street Data. They say students should be talking for 75% of class time. Do students in your school talk for 75% of each class period? I would love for you to walk into any classroom in your community and see this in action. If you're smiling to yourself as you listen right now, grab 20 minutes on my calendar to brainstorm how I can help you make this big dream a reality. I'll help you build a comprehensive plan from full-day trainings and discussion protocols like Circle and Socratic Seminar to follow-up classroom visits where I can plan, witness, and debrief discussion-based lessons with your teachers. Sign up for a nerdy, no-strings-attached brainstorm call at lindsaybethlyons.com/contact. Until next time, leaders, think big, act brave, and be your best self.
This podcast is a proud member of the Teach Better Podcast Network. Better today, better tomorrow, and the podcast to get you there. Explore more podcasts at teachbetter.com/podcasts, and we'll see you at the next episode.